At late reggae producer Lee Scratch Perry through the records available in my collection. 1973 saw Lee Perry issue perhaps his most cohesive musical vision in LP format to date, what became commonly known as Blackboard Jungle Dub. The title I can't confirm, but perhaps referencing the 1950s film Blackboard Jungle, which featured rock and roll in the soundtrack. This presented several of his strongest rhythm tracks of the previous few years, including Bunny Wailer's Perry-produced cut of Dreamland and Bob Marley and the Wailers' Kaya, along with Junior Byles' A Place Called Africa, and his cover of the Peggy Lee jazz standard Fever, presented in a dub format, remixed to focus on the drum and the bass with a fairly dread atmosphere that still managed to find time for flashes of Perry's quirky sense of humor. But he had formulated his dream of owning his own studio, where he could work to his heart's content without watching the clock, having to pay hourly for time to pursue his productions. To that end, he began construction on the studio of his own at the very back of his house on Cardiff Crescent in Washington Gardens. Construction was overseen by guitarist Bobby Aitken, who did some of the masonry, as well as singer Leonard Dillon of the Ethiopians worked on the construction of the studio. It would be a fairly rudimentary setup, especially in the very beginning. He had a simple 4-track recording desk with an Alice mixing board, a selection of instruments, and a Grantham spring reverb unit, as well as an Echoplex tape delay. Scratch would develop a strong fondness for his sound effects that he could apply to the tracks as he was recording. In the transitional phase, before the studio was fully operational, he would be recording some parts of tracks there, would also be reusing tracks previously recorded elsewhere. In this transitional phase, he issued the debut LP by a harmony group called the Silvertones, issued as Silver Bullets by Trojan in the UK. This is a 2018 Vinyl Me Please issue. The Silvertones were a harmony group, originally a duo of Gilmore Grant and Keith Coley, later joined by Delroy Denton on lead. They had already had a solid track record recording for Duke Reid and others, and had worked with Lee Perry going back to 1969. One of their early tunes for him, Kitty O, which was credited to the Musketeers, had appeared in 1969 on his debut album, The Upsetter, but he continued working with them in a later period once they began hanging around his Upsetter record shop. Debut LP by the Silvertones, issued in a remixed form for the UK market. I haven't heard the Jamaican version, issued on his new Black Art label, which he inaugurated that year, but apparently completely different mix to this, quite rare. Trojan issue, quite collectible as well, features a sound effect of motorcycle and some dialogue on the very first song with some English accents, so you know it was overdubbed in the UK. The Silvertones, a heavily rhythm and blues, soul-oriented group, kind of known for their covers of American R&B tunes, particularly by Brooke Benton. And this showed several of their cover versions on here, including Sugar Sugar by the Archies. So fairly rhythm and blues accented reggae on here, but it included the stunning Rejoice Jaja Children, deeply dread, deeply fervent and fervently spiritual. Lyrics reportedly written by Perry's wife, Pauline Morrison, and the version side, Rejoicing Skank, was a dub mix showing the hissing sound of whooshing cymbals that Perry was becoming fond of in his dub mixes. The Silvertones, there was some controversy over this one, whether it was recorded in Perry's studio or not. The surviving Silvertones claim it was recorded in the Black Ark. Other experts say recorded elsewhere or recorded partly at the Ark. Some say voiced at King Tubby's studio, as Perry's was not fully operational yet. Debut album by the Silvertones, highlighted by Rejoice, Jaja Children.
Jesus went into the mountain many years ago. His disciples were there, and he began to speak with new meanings so very loud and clear. He said, "Blessed are the poor, for they shall have food, and blessed are the merciful, and the pure in heart, for there shall be no mercy."
By the end of 1973, Lee Perry's new studio was fully operational, and he kicked off its shakedown year with a prolific series of recordings, which would only pick up in pace as time went on. The studio was wired by engineer Errol Thompson, who had recorded some of Perry's sessions with the Wailers at Randy's studio and would go on to make his mark as part of the Mighty Two production duo with Joe Gibbs and mix the seminal African Dub Almighty series of LPs. Though Perry was quick to assert only he could operate the studio and fully understood its inner workings, nonetheless, very rudimentary setup, especially in the very beginning as he kicked off his recordings in his new studio at the back of his home. From the start, it would have a very relaxed, informal, yet creative and family-oriented vibe as his kids would drop by, maybe even be pressed into service for some vocals. Longtime friends and collaborators like Waddy Burnett and Junior Biles would do various jobs around the premises, maybe sleep there. Bob Marley would show up at odd intervals to work on material. Lee Perry kicking off his recording in earnest in what became known as the Black Ark, the name referring to both the biblical Ark of the Covenant and Noah's Ark, a place of holiness, of sacredness. There was a Bible that they used to consecrate the studio as a place from which righteous works only would emerge, though Perry saw nothing incongruous in issuing the odd risque tune or ones that showcased his sometimes bizarre, off-kilter sense of humor, as on Kentucky Skank, which celebrated his love then of the fried chicken brand, as well as Bathroom Skank, a further version which included his personal hygiene instructions with the immortal lines, "Grab a towel, scrub your bowel." Perry's sense of humor, always evident in his works, set him apart from other producers of the time, as well as his sonic innovations. One of the first tunes released from the Ark was reportedly idiosyncratic singer Leo Graham's Black Candle. Black Candle by Leo Graham, a tune taking aim at users of black magic called Obia in Jamaica. This would be followed by a further cut of the rhythm credited to the Upsetters, more focused on the bass and drum and featuring Perry himself chanting Bible verses to further ward off the unrighteous. This is from the Trojan late 80s compilation called Public Gesturing, compiled by Steve Barrow, showcasing the more scrappy, contentious side of Lee Perry as he takes musical aim at some of his friends, rivals. The bizarre Nine-Finger Jerry Lewis reportedly aimed at fellow producer Niney the Observer. Lee Perry also temporarily at war with longtime friend Bunny Lee in this time, as witnessed by English journalist Chris Lane, who visited the studio at this time, witnessed some of those sessions going on. Lane brought a DJ named Prince Jazzbo around the studio one day for an interview. Chris Lane wasn't there at that time, so Perry put Jazzbo to work, began recording with him. However, Perry was running into financial difficulties at this time. His labels, which released his music in the UK, particularly Trojan and Pama, were running into financial difficulties as musical fashions changed in the lucrative UK market. He was working a lot with Maritone sound system owner Winston Blake in the early days of the Black Ark studio, who was helping him with finances and occasionally recording with him, including the title track here itself, public gesturing, credited to Judge Winchester, another one of those Jamaican faux courtroom records in which Perry did some social commentary on the Gun Court Act of the time, which saw Michael Manley's Jamaican government of the time issue some very draconian laws which would provide for indefinite detention of anyone found in possession of a gun or even a shell casing. Lee Perry's sessions continuing in full swing at this time.
Chicken Mary, hark the near, hypocrite, beware. Chicken Mary, hark the near, hypocrite, beware. You could burn bad lamp, little more, iniquity worker. I'm gonna hold it. I'm gonna hold it. You could burn black candle, little more, iniquity worker. I'm gonna hold it.
Despite the relative success of his release of Leo Graham's Black Candle, which reportedly sold around 15,000 copies of the single in Jamaica, a major hit proved elusive for Lee Perry in the first year of the Black Ark. Despite that, the studio began to be patronized by other artists and producers doing their own productions, sometimes with Lee Perry offering help and advice in the creative atmosphere that he fostered there. The studio would be patronized by UK-based producer Winston Edwards, who had known Perry for some time. He would begin work on a series of rhythm tracks, some either recorded or partially worked on at the Ark, which would surface first on Natty Locke's dub, appeared around 1974 on Edwards' Fay label in the UK, contained a couple of Black Ark recorded tracks. And then King Tubby Meets the Upsetter at the grassroots of dub, which came about as Edwards realized on the flight back to the UK from Jamaica that he had about half an LP's worth of tracks recorded at Perry's studio and half recorded at King Tubby's studio. I'll put the two of them together as King Tubby Meets the Upsetter. This album was a major success on the UK market and helped popularize dub and the dub LP, and contains certain number of tracks, about roughly half recorded Lee Perry at the Black Ark studio. The studio would also begin to be used by artists doing their own self-productions, including a DJ who had done some early recordings with Lee Perry under various names as Dr. Alimentado. He would cut the seminal, the unhinged, Best Dressed Chicken in Town at the Ark, as well as Oil Crisis, I believe, Can't Conquer Natty Dreadlocks, Black Ark, 1974, 1973, finally released in LP form by the Greensleeves label in the UK. Classic DJ album with the wild, unhinged atmosphere only Lee Perry's Black Ark could provide. Dr. Alimentado, another DJ named Pat Francis, who is going by the name Ja Lloyd, would also record Soldier Round the Corner, the title track of this LP, at the Ark. He was had a long association with Lee Perry, had actually been the seller at his Upsetter record shop, longtime friend and associate. That song, Soldier Round the Corner, was recorded on the To Be a Lover rhythm track that Lee Perry had had a hit with Shenley Doofus previously. On his Upsetter imprint, singer Shenley Doofus, To Be a Lover, cover of William Bell's US soul hit, I Forgot to Be Your Lover. By roundabout means, another producer named Ainsley Folder got a hold of that Upsetter produced rhythm track and released another cut of it, same song, this time by a singer called Delroy Wilson. Released it as Have Some Mercy on the DJ label. Lee Perry's rhythm track that he had recorded, but a new singer voiced over it, turned into a major hit. Lee Perry, incensed by this, and created a new version of the song by a singer called Earl George Lawrence, who he would rename George Earl. Lee Perry's habit of renaming his artists. This artist would also be known as George Faith, as Lee Perry continued to work with him in the ensuing period.
Don't fly, don't fly, don't fly, don't fly. I miss the best, the dress, the chicken. Ring it, and sing it, and jaja, and jaja, and jaja, and jaja. And jaja, and jaja, and jaja, and jaja, and jaja. And say me true, me corner, 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 corner. I call the best, the best, the best, the chicken in the town. I call the best, the best, the best, the dress, the chicken in the town.
When a major hit finally emerged from the Black Ark, it came from a previously unknown source. An amateur singer by the name of Alison Cadigan, who is a librarian by day, had been brought to the Ark to do some harmony vocals. Lee Perry, listening in, was very excited by what he heard. She had a sultry tone of voice he found very enticing, asked to record her, and he put her on a cover of a U.S. R&B hit by the Risque singer Millie Jackson, a song called Hurt So Good. Perry enlisted the bass playing of Boris Gardner, who is a band leader and session musician who would become a very important collaborator at the Ark. The resulting song, Hurt So Good, would not be a major success in Jamaica, but would resonate strongly in the UK, where it circulated at the Notting Hill Carnival and would eventually place highly in the UK pop charts and see Cadigan appear on Top of the Pops. Lee Perry continued to work on songs with Cadigan in more of a soul reggae style, with the spiky and rough edges of the typical Upsetter productions smoothed out, showing a more commercial side to his productions. Resulting LP with Susan Cadigan would finally be released in 1977, though recorded in the early days of the Ark. It would be released as Sexy Susan in Jamaica, Perry's nickname for Susan Cadigan, as he renamed her. He found Susan a more seductive sounding name than plain old Anne Cadigan, Perry's habit of renaming his artists. But Cadigan would be brought to the UK to promote the song Hurt So Good by Magnet Records, which had picked it up from Dip Records in the UK as it became a bigger and bigger hit, went up the charts. Cadigan would depart to promote the song in the UK. Lee Perry, perhaps fearing that his young starlet was being poached away from him, flew to the UK to confront her. She was caught between Magnet Records, which had flown her to the UK, put her up in a hotel, faced with a shaky financial arrangement with Perry himself. She would elect to sign with Magnet Records in a deal that ultimately saw her fade quickly from stardom and also marked the end of her relationship with Perry. In this time, Pama Records, Trojan Records undergoing financial difficulties, Trojan in the process of being bought out by Marcel Rod of Saga Records. The Susan Cadigan LP finally issued in the UK on Trojan around 1977, though recorded in the early days of the Ark. Highlights included Nice and Easy, quite a dance-friendly song, and overall a smoother, more pop-friendly side of the Upsetter productions. The next major hit from the Black Ark would be with longtime collaborator Junior Biles, who had recorded the Beat Down Babylon LP for Perry. He would release Curly Locks, which would appear in Jamaica on the Orchid label. This also would resonate strongly in the UK, selling a reported 250,000 copies as the phenomena of Rastafari, the growing of dreadlocks, became omnipresent. Everything went Rasta in reggae starting from this point on, and this song perfectly encapsulated romantic theme with themes of roots and culture. In the title, as the singer tells the story of a love affair with a girl who's in love with the dreadlocks, but her father does not approve. Remember, Rastafari, very controversial at this time, very looked down on in conservative society. The singer hits back with the notable insults, "Your father is a pork chop," a double insult, as pork is anathema to the Rastafari Ital diet, also calling him a vampire and a walking dead, bringing the supernatural in there as well. Major touchstone hit for Junior Byles, perhaps his last major one with Lee Perry, as he would shortly depart to work with Pete Weston and his Micron label. So the first shakedown year of Lee Perry's Black Ark Studio had its lean times as he shifted around for a hit. It was being used by other producers for productions Lee Perry supervised but did not directly produce himself. Yabby U recorded Run Come Rally and Ja Vengeance there. Lee Perry reportedly being astonished that Yabby U could operate the studio as well as he. Also Sonia Pottinger patronizing the studio, but Lee Perry's productions increasingly becoming more prolific, more confident in the sound of his studio. Those hits, Hurt So Good with Susan Cadogan and Curly Locks with Junior Byles, the UK proceeds of those hits, in lieu of his payment for those, Lee Perry would invest in studio equipment, upgrade the sound of his studio, which would put him in good stead in the coming years. Stay tuned for the next installment of my look at Lee Perry. Thanks for tuning in, guys.
Wop.